The massive dome of the Galactic Council chambers gleamed under three suns. Inside, the air felt cold despite the hundreds of beings gathered from across the stars. Ambassador Kalnar wiped sweat from his scaled brow as he stepped up to the speaking platform. His tail twitched with nervousness. "Honored members of the council," he began, his translator converting his hissing language into the common galactic speech. "I come with urgent news from our outposts near the outer rim." The council members shifted in their seats. Many looked bored. They had heard warnings before. "Our sensors have detected unusual energy patterns in the dead zone. 15 scout ships have gone missing in the past month. We have intercepted strange signals that our best code breakers cannot understand." Kalnar's voice grew stronger as he spoke. "All signs point to a large force gathering beyond our borders. High Counselor Zex, a being with blue skin and 4 waving tentacles, let out a sound like bubbles popping, the Arkan version of laughter. The Silurians always see danger in the shadows," Zex said, his tentacles curled with amusement. "The outer rim has always been full of pirates and small threats. Nothing organized has come from that region in 1,000 years." In the back row of the chamber, Jack Miller, Earth's observer, leaned forward. Humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. The advanced species of the galaxy saw them as barely more than clever animals. Earth had not earned a council seat yet, only the right to watch and learn. Miller knew that look on Kalnar's face. He had seen it on the faces of people who had real information but were not being believed. His time in Earth's military had taught him to spot the difference between panic and genuine concern. Admiral Shora, her crystal body catching the light as she moved, spoke next. "The Silurians have been right before. These patterns match other invasions from our history. I recommend we send a fleet to investigate." "A waste of ships and time," said the representative from the Vorlan Empire, a being made of living metal. "The rim is too far from our important worlds to matter." Zex called for a vote. Those in favor of sending forces to investigate Ambassador Kalnar's claims. Only 2 lights turned green. The Silurians and the Felicians. Those against. 25 red lights filled the giant screen. "The motion fails," Zex announced. "We will not waste resources on ghost stories from the rim." Miller watched Kalnar's shoulders drop. The ambassador had tried his best. As the meeting ended, Miller slipped through the crowd toward him. "Ambassador," he said with a small bow, "I believe you." Kalnar looked down at the human with surprise. "You do? Why would you, when even the oldest races do not?" "Because on Earth, we learned the hard way that ignoring warnings leads to disaster." Miller's face grew serious. "May I send your data to my government?" "It would not matter. Humans have no voice here, and your ships are too few and too simple to make a difference." Miller smiled slightly. "We may surprise you." That night, in his small quarters, Miller sent a message to Earth using the secure channel. It contained all of Kalnar's data, plus his own observations. He ended with simple words: "Begin preparations. They won't listen." 3 days later, he received an equally brief reply. "Understood. Defense Protocol 7 activated." On the edges of known space, dark ships began to gather. Their hulls seemed to pulse with life. Inside them, creatures with too many eyes watched the unsuspecting worlds of the Galactic Council. They had waited for centuries. The time for harvest had come. And only Earth was getting ready. 3 months after Jack Miller's warning, the skies above Earth buzzed with activity. Ships rose and fell like bees around a hive. The United Defense Force had worked day and night to prepare for what was coming. In a bunker deep under the Rocky Mountains, General Olivia Reeves stood before a table of world leaders. Her gray uniform was crisp, her expression stern. "Our fleet will be ready in 2 days," she said, pointing to holographic ships floating above the table. "We've equipped them with our best weapons and shields, though they're still not as advanced as what the Council races have." President Howard, a tall woman with short white hair, frowned. "And you're certain the threat is real?" "We're committing almost everything we have to this." The door opened, and Jack Miller walked in. He had returned to Earth on the fastest ship available after seeing something terrible. "It's real, Madam President," he said. "The Vraxians have arrived." He placed a small device on the table. It projected images that made several leaders gasp. Planets burning. Strange ships that looked half alive destroying everything in their path. Alien soldiers moving through cities, taking people away. These images came from the outer colonies of the Felician Guard, Miller explained. They were the first hit. The Vraxians emerged from subspace at 6 different points simultaneously. No warning, no demands. They just started killing. Dr. Alan Parker stepped forward. He was Earth's leading expert on alien biology. His hand shook slightly as he expanded one of the images. "The Vraxians don't just kill," he said. "They harvest. They take genetic material from other species. They learn from every enemy they face. They adapt quickly." "How quickly?" asked General Reeves. "Hours, not days," Parker replied. By the second battle, they already had defenses against Felician weapons. President Howard looked at the images again. "And the Galactic Council, what are they doing?" Miller's laugh had no humor in it. "Running, hiding. Their ships are beautiful but built for show. They've been at peace so long they forgot how to fight a real war." As if on cue, a communication officer burst into the room. "Madam President, we're receiving an urgent message from the Galactic Council." The main screen lit up to show High Counselor Zex. His blue skin had turned pale, and his tentacles moved in jerky motions that suggested fear. "People of Earth," he said, "the Galactic Council officially requests your assistance against the Vraxian threat. We offer immediate full membership and sharing of all our technology in exchange for your military aid." The room fell silent. Then General Reeves spoke, her voice cold. "Now they want our help." After they laughed at the warning. "It doesn't matter," President Howard said quietly. "If the Council falls, we're next, and we'll be alone." She turned to the screen. "High Counselor, Earth will send help, but we will remember that you ignored the signs until it was almost too late." 2 days later, the UDF fleet prepared to leave Earth's orbit. 10,000 men and women stood at attention as Admiral Samantha Woods gave her final address before departure. "We're about to show the galaxy what humans can do," she said, her voice carrying to every ship through the comms. "They think we're primitive because our ships aren't as pretty as theirs. They think we're weak because we haven't been in space as long." She paused, looking at the faces before her, young and old, from every nation on Earth. "But we know something they've forgotten. We know how to fight. We know how to face impossible odds. And most importantly, we know how to stand together even with those who didn't stand with us." The fleet rose into the darkness, ready to face an enemy that had made the stars themselves tremble. The war had begun, and humanity had joined it. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Proxima Centauri. The sight that greeted them made even veteran officers pause. The combined ships of the Galactic Council, once proud and gleaming, were scattered across space. Many were damaged. Some were just floating debris. Captain Ben Harris stood on the bridge of the UDF Defiant. His ship wasn't the biggest or most advanced in Earth's fleet, but it was fast and packed with weapons. "Status report on the battle," he ordered. His second-in-command, Commander Lily Chen, studied the tactical screens. Her fingers moved quickly over the displays. "The Council ships are in retreat," she said. "They're trying to maintain formation, but it's falling apart. The Vraxians are picking them off one by one." Harris watched the enemy ships. They moved together like a school of fish, changing direction as one. Their hulls seemed to pulse with an inner light. "They're too organized," he said. "Too perfect. And look at the Council ships. They're fighting like they're in a training exercise." "They don't know how to adapt," Chen agreed. "They've been at peace too long." Admiral Wood's voice came through the comm system to all human ships. "All captains, implement Prairie Fire Protocol. I repeat, Implement Prairie Fire Protocol. Harris nodded to Chen. You heard the Admiral. Let's show these aliens something new. Throughout the human fleet, captains gave similar orders. Within moments, the neat formation of Earth ships broke apart. To an observer, it would have looked like chaos or a panicked retreat. The Vraxian ships moved to pursue, spreading out to chase the scattered human vessels. Their perfect formation stretched thin. On the main Galactic Council ship, Supreme Commander Vox watched in horror. His many eyes blinked rapidly. The humans are fleeing, he said. Already they run. His aide, a younger member of his species, studied the data streams. Sir, I don't think they're running. Their engine signatures don't match escape patterns. Then what? Vox began. His question was answered as the human ships suddenly changed direction. They had lured the Vraxians into a trap. Now the human vessels darted between the enemy ships, getting so close that the Vraxians couldn't fire their main weapons without hitting their own kind. Impossible, Vox whispered. How are they coordinating without central commands? The aide's eyes widened. They're not sending command signals at all. Each ship seems to be acting independently. On the Defiant, Harris gave the order. Fire point-blank torpedoes. All tubes. Nuclear torpedoes, considered outdated by Council standards, but still deadly, slammed into the nearest Vraxian ship at close range. Its shields, designed to stop energy weapons from a distance, couldn't block the physical impact. The alien vessel broke apart. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield as human ships struck from unexpected angles, using weapons that the Vraxians hadn't adapted to yet. They can't predict what we'll do if we don't know ourselves, Chen said with a grim smile. Harris nodded. That's why every captain has authority to make tactical decisions. We have a plan, but we each executed our own way. Slowly, the tide of battle turned. The Vraxian ships, confused by the lack of pattern in the human attacks, began to retreat. Some Council ships, seeing the human success, tried to copy their tactics. Admiral Wood's voice came through again. Phase 1 complete. All ships form up on my position. We've bloodied their nose. Now let's show them what happens when they mess with humanity and our allies. From his command chair, Harris watched as the scattered human fleet came back together, not in the perfect rows the Council used, but in a flexible formation that could change at a moment's notice. The real fight was just beginning. While battles raged in space, the Vraxians had already landed on 7 Council worlds. On Tartarus IV, a mining colony rich with rare minerals, alien soldiers moved through the streets. They were tall beings with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors to match their surroundings. Their eyes glowed yellow in the dim light. Colonel Maya Rodriguez stood in the UDF dropship as it entered the planet's atmosphere. The ship shook violently. Through the small windows, she could see the surface of Tartarus IV, once a bustling colony, now a war zone. Smoke rose from the main city. 2 minutes to landing, the pilot called. Rodriguez looked at the soldiers around her. 200 of Earth's best fighters, each one trained not just to follow orders but to think independently. They wore armor that was simpler than what Council soldiers had, but it was battle-tested and practical. Listen up, she said, her voice carrying through their helmet comms. The Vraxians adapt quickly. They study patterns and counter them. So we won't give them patterns to study. She tapped her wrist computer, sending a file to each squad leader. Each squad has different tactics. Every 30 minutes, switch to a new approach. Don't establish routines. Be unpredictable. That's how we win. The dropship landed with a heavy thud. The doors opened, and the soldiers moved out quickly, spreading across the landing zone in practiced formations. 3 other ships landed nearby, bringing the total to 800 human troops. It wasn't many for taking back a city, but they were all Rodriguez had. Major Kelly, secure the spaceport, she ordered. Captain Wu, your people head for the power plant. Lieutenant Diaz, the communications center is yours. They moved through the ruins of what had once been a beautiful city. The buildings were made of a crystal-like material that now lay shattered on the ground. Bodies of the local inhabitants, a species that looked like tall, thin humans with purple skin, were scattered everywhere. Rodriguez's team encountered the first Vraxians near the city center. The aliens moved with eerie grace, their weapons making almost no sound as they fired energy bolts. "Switch to sonic disruptors," Rodriguez ordered. Her troops pulled out devices that looked like small speakers. When activated, they emitted a sound that humans couldn't hear, but that made the Vraxians clutch their heads in pain. It was a trick the Council forces hadn't tried. They relied too much on energy weapons that the Vraxians had quickly developed shields against. For 30 minutes, the human forces used sound-based attacks and close combat weapons. Then, as planned, they switched to electromagnetic pulse devices that shut down the Vraxians' advanced systems. 30 minutes later, they changed again to chemical weapons that affected the aliens' ability to change colors. By the time the sun set on Tartarus IV, the humans had secured half the city. The Vraxians were in retreat, unable to predict what tactics the humans would use next. In a makeshift command center, Rodriguez met with the local Arkan military leader. Commander Zolt belonged to the same species as High Counselor Zex, with blue skin and 4 tentacles. His uniform was torn and dirty. "Your soldiers fight strangely," Zolt said, "but effectively. How do they know what to do without constant commands?" Rodriguez smiled slightly. "We train them to think, not just follow orders. Each soldier knows the mission objective, but they decide how best to achieve it based on the situation." Zolt's tentacles moved in what might have been embarrassment. "The Council thought humans were primitive because your technology isn't as advanced. We were wrong. Technology isn't everything in war," Rodriguez replied. "Sometimes the oldest methods work best." She looked at the map of the city. Tomorrow they would push forward, continuing to change tactics to keep the enemy guessing. The ground war had just begun, but humans were already changing how it was fought. 6 months into the war, the tide had begun to turn. Human tactics in space and on the ground had slowed the Vraxian advance, but everyone knew it wasn't enough. The aliens were still adapting, still learning. Each victory became harder than the last. On the Jupiter Scientific Station, Dr. Noah Williams hadn't slept in 3 days. His lab was filled with pieces of Vraxian technology, parts of a ship that had been captured in a daring raid led by Captain Harris. The room glowed with strange blue light coming from the alien metal. Williams ran his hand through his messy brown hair as he studied the readings on his screen. Something wasn't making sense. "Dr. Williams." A voice came from the doorway. A tall Silurian scientist named Krell stood there, his scaled skin reflecting the blue glow. "The Council representatives have arrived for your report." Williams nodded and followed Krell to the main conference room. Around a large table sat members from each major council race, along with Admiral Woods representing Earth. High Counselor Zex himself had come, his blue tentacles moving nervously. "Dr. Williams," Woods said, "you called this meeting. You said you found something important." Williams connected his data pad to the room's display system. Images of Vraxian ship parts appeared on the large screen. "We've been looking at this all wrong," he began. "We've been treating Vraxian ships and weapons as machines like ours. They're not. They're alive." Murmurs went around the table. A Felician representative's crystal body flashed with surprise. "Not alive like you and me," Williams clarified. "But their technology is grown, not built. It's part machine, part biological. And it all comes from the same basic pattern." He zoomed in on what looked like veins running through a piece of metal. "These are neural pathways. They carry signals, yes, but also nutrients. The ship repairs itself, it grows, and most importantly," he paused, looking at each face around the table, "it's all connected to their hive mind." High Counselor Zex leaned forward. "What exactly are you saying, human?" "I'm saying their ships, their weapons, their armor. It's all an extension of them. One system, and any system can be hacked." Williams changed the display to show a simulation. We've been fighting them ship by ship, soldier by soldier. But if we could introduce something into their network, a virus of sorts, we could affect them all at once. Admiral Woods frowned. A virus? Like a disease. More like what we call a computer virus. A code that disrupts their systems. It wouldn't kill them all. I don't think we want that kind of genocide on our hands. But it could slow their ability to adapt, maybe even force them to retreat. The Council scientists looked confused. Their technology had developed differently than Earth's. The concept of attacking a network was new to them. A Vorlon representative, his metal body gleaming, spoke up. How would we deliver such a thing? We would need to get inside their network. Someone would need to board their command ship, Williams admitted. It would be dangerous. Maybe impossible. The room fell silent. Then Admiral Woods stood up. We have a stealth ship that might get close enough. The Phantom. Its captain is good. The best we have for this kind of mission. Who would go? Asked Zex, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. A joint team, Woods replied. Human Special Forces and Council specialists. Led by Commander Keith Young. Williams displayed an image of a man in his 30s with a serious face and sharp eyes. Young was a cybersecurity expert before joining the military, Woods explained. If anyone can upload a virus into the Vraxian network, it's him. High Counselor Zex, who had once dismissed human warnings, now looked at Admiral Woods with newfound respect. When can this mission begin? He asked. Woods looked at Williams. How soon can your virus be ready? It's ready now, Williams said. I've been working on it since we captured the ship parts. Woods nodded. Then the mission leaves tomorrow. And may whatever gods you believe in watch over them. The Phantom moved silently through space. Unlike other ships with their bright engines and metal hulls, the stealth vessel was dark, covered in materials that absorbed light and sensor scans. Inside, Commander Keith Young studied the holographic display of the massive Vraxian hive ship they were approaching. That thing is bigger than I expected, he said quietly. Beside him stood Nera, a Silurian biologist whose scales shimmered faintly in the dim light of the bridge. 4 other specialists completed the team, a Felician engineer, an Arkan weapons expert, a Vorlon systems analyst, and another human, Sergeant Pete Dawson. Their central neural cluster should be here, Nera said, pointing to a glowing spot deep within the hive ship. If we can reach it, we can inject Dr. Williams' virus directly into their main system. Young nodded. The Phantom will get us close. We'll use the boarding pods to attach to their outer hull. Then we go in quiet. The plan was simple but dangerous. The Phantom would approach using radiation fields as cover, areas most ships avoided because of the danger. This route, while risky, meant fewer Vraxian patrols. Captain Lin, the Phantom's commander, guided the ship expertly through the radiation belts. Alarms occasionally flared as radiation levels spiked, but the ship's special shielding held. 2 minutes to optimal position, Lin reported. Boarding pods ready. Young checked his equipment one last time. The virus was stored in a special device that looked like a small metal sphere. It contained both the code Dr. Williams had created and the biological component needed to interface with the Vraxian systems. Remember, he told his team, their biology makes them sensitive to certain sounds. The sonic disruptors should give us an edge, but they won't work for long. The Vraxians adapt quickly. They moved to the boarding pods, small vessels designed to attach to enemy ships like remeras on a shark. Each pod could carry 3 people. Young Nara and the Felician engineer named Krill took the first pod. The others took the second. Good luck, Captain Lin said as the pods detached from the Phantom. We'll be waiting for your signal to extract. The journey to the hive ship was tense but uneventful. The boarding pod's stealth systems kept them hidden as they approached the massive alien vessel. With a soft thud that Young could feel through his boots, the pods attached to the outer hull. Cutting through the hull was the most dangerous part. If they were detected now, They would have nowhere to run. The Felician engineer worked quickly, using a tool that melted through the organic metal without triggering alarms. Once inside, they found themselves in a dimly lit corridor. The walls pulsed slightly, as if breathing. The air was thick and warm. "This way," Nara whispered, following readings on her scanner. "The neural cluster is half a kilometer in this direction." They moved quietly through the ship, encountering few Vraxians. Those they did meet were quickly subdued with the sonic disruptors, devices that emitted frequencies painful to Vraxian hearing, but harmless to the team. As they got closer to their target, Young felt uneasy. "This is too easy," he said. "There should be more security around something so important." The Arcan weapons expert, Ziv, nodded in agreement. "It feels like a trap." Despite their concerns, they pushed forward. They had come too far to turn back. After navigating a maze of corridors that seemed to shift and change, they reached a large chamber. In the center, a glowing mass of tissue and technology pulsed with blue light. "The neural cluster," Nara confirmed. "We need to get closer to inject the virus." As they stepped into the chamber, lights suddenly flared. Doorways they hadn't noticed opened, and Vraxian soldiers poured in from all sides. "It is a trap," Young said grimly, drawing his weapon. "They knew we were coming." Looking at the surrounded team, he made a split-second decision that would change the course of the war. 3 weeks after Commander Young's mission, representatives from all 28 species gathered in the Great Council Chamber on Centauride Prime. The mood was different from before. Where once there had been arrogance and dismissal, now there was respect and unity. President Howard of Earth stood before the assembled leaders. Her white hair was pulled back, her face solemn yet proud. Behind her stood Admiral Woods, General Reeves, and other human military leaders who had helped turn the tide of war. "The Vraxians have retreated beyond the outer rim," Howard announced. "Their fleet no longer threatens our worlds. Their ground forces have withdrawn." A cheer went up from the gathered representatives. It had been a long, hard war, but it was over, at least for now. High Counselor Zex floated forward, his blue tentacles now bearing ceremonial gold bands. "Today marks the official acceptance of Earth as the 28th member of the Galactic Council," he said. "But more than that, today we acknowledge our debt to humanity." Screens around the chamber showed images from the war. Human ships fighting with unexpected tactics, human soldiers adapting faster than the enemy. And finally, the Phantom on its mission to the Vraxian high ship. Commander Keith Young and his team faced impossible odds, Zex continued. Surrounded by enemy forces, they could have retreated. Instead, Young made a choice that saved us all. The screen showed Young's final moments, captured by his team's recording devices. The neural cluster chamber, Vraxians closing in, Young pulling out a second data device, one no one knew he had brought. "The original plan was to disable the Vraxians completely," Zex explained, but Young saw another way. He modified the virus at the last moment. In the recording, Young's voice was clear. "I'm changing the target. Not their command systems, their adaptation centers. If we kill them all, we're no better than they are." The modified virus spread through the Vraxian network, Zex said. "It didn't destroy them. It just slowed their ability to adapt so quickly. It gave us a fair fight. And when faced with equal odds, they chose to retreat rather than be destroyed." The final image showed Young staying behind as his team escaped, making sure the virus uploaded completely. His last transmission played through the chamber. "Humanity's gift to the galaxy isn't just our fighting spirit. It's knowing when not to annihilate your enemy." Young hadn't returned. His sacrifice ensured the mission's success. President Howard stepped forward again. "We come before you not as conquerors or saviors," she said, "but as partners. Humanity's history is filled with war, which made us valuable in this conflict. But our history also taught us the importance of peace after war, of finding ways to live together despite differences." High Counselor Zex bowed low, his tentacles touching the floor. a sign of deep respect in Arkan culture. The council acknowledges error in judgment. We hear your wisdom, species of Earth. That evening after the ceremony, Admiral Wood stood with Ambassador Kellner in a small garden created to honor those lost in the war. At its center stood a statue of Commander Young. "Do you think the Vraxians will return?" Kellner asked quietly. Woods looked up at the stars visible through the garden's clear dome. "Someday. But next time, we'll face them together. That's the real victory here. Not that we won, but how we won. By standing united." As they walked away, engineers were installing a plaque at the garden's entrance. It bore words from an ancient Earth philosopher. "The true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him." The galaxy had changed, and humanity had changed it.